Hey guys, Zibboyeye or just Zib is fine, and today, it's 3D movies. We're talking about 3D movies today. The early 2010s marked a resurgence for 3D films. Most people credit this trend to the multi-billion-dollar blockbuster Avatar, but personally I think these films were just late to the party started by Spy Kids 3D. Nevertheless, the revival of 3D cinema meant the return of 3D horror. Saw 3D, Apartment 1303 3D, Piranha 3D, and My Bloody Valentine 3D to name a few. This was not isolated to the West though. Japan had their screen-piercing scares too with Sadako 3D, Sadako 3D 2, Scary Stories 3D, Shock Labyrinth 3D, and Tormented 3D. The latter two we'll be covering today. I'm covering both in this video for several reasons, namely their 3D gimmick, scary rabbits, and director Takashi Shimizu. The name shouldn't be too unfamiliar with J-horror fans. Shimizu is most famous for directing Ju-on as well as its American adaptation, The Grudge. I love Ju-on too, and even if I enjoy his other films at varying degrees, I'm usually a fan of his horror. So, does this 3D rabbit pseudo-duology hold up? Let's find out, starting with Shock Labyrinth 3D. The story follows Ken reuniting with childhood companions Motoki and Ren. However, they receive a surprise visit from Yuki, their friend who had been missing for 10 years. After Yuki sustains an injury, the group takes her to a hospital where their long-repressed memories reawaken. Their only hope to survive is to escape. A notable aspect of this film's release is its inclusion of an English dub. It's not amazing, but it's alright.
After we were separated, I just kept calling out your names. I thought that you guys would come and save me, so I kept calling and calling.
Almost none of my J-horror movies have an English dub, so I find it special. The option makes the film more accessible to English viewers and can spice up a second viewing. The story is serviceable, but it hit the right marks for me. The confined haunted hallways reminded me of Corpse Party. There's also some time travel thrown in the mix, which I'm a fan of. Within the hospital exists a time wrap where present coexists with past. In other words, Ken and his friends interact and influence their child selves when they had first entered the labyrinth. Time travel stories can be hard to manage because of the concept's difficulty to grasp. However, the movie's timeline is coherent with setups and payoffs that add up.
あの日、俺逃げ出す時、変な大人に捕まりそうになって。やめろ！
何すんだよ！
The plot develops by revealing each character's contribution to Yuki's disappearance. I enjoyed this approach. I found it interesting to delegate levels of fault to the characters. I recommend watching the movie with others and discussing who you think is most to blame for Yuki's demise. There's only one issue I found in the reveals, but it can be easily assessed. In one scene, Rin confesses that she was jealous of Yuki. Rin explains when Yuki fell down a floor, she made a lie in order to abandon Yuki.
本当はユキがいたこと分かってたの。嘘ついた。
Then, in the very next scene, we follow present Motoki and Miyu witnessing the lie unfold.
言っちゃダメ。でもなんかいる。下に怖いものがいる。
It's the exact opposite of shocking. This reveal comes before the setup. If only they had switched the scenes around, this issue would have been averted. The flaws with the organization persist in the following scene. We cut from present Motoki in the labyrinth to future Ken at the end of the film. We're already keeping up with multiple narratives. Ken with Rin, Motoki with Miyu, and not to mention their past selves. It's jarring to cut to the future just and only this once in the middle of the movie. They should have saved this scene for the end, keeping the order of events linear. Or if they were so eager to spur interest with this scene, use it as a cold open. Although these issues are intrusive, I'm fairly forgiving of them. For one, they're isolated to the middle of the film and have no presence beyond that. For two, issues deeply ingrained in a script are more of a sore thumb to me than these issues that can be fixed in editing, the end of production. The script is still solid, so I can overlook these few blemishes. I also compliment the presentation. Its appearance strangely reminds me of that from Saw 3D, sans the shortcomings of Saw 3D. For one, both films apply pervading color to their shots. One issue I noted in my Saw 3D review was that the shots had such little contrast that the backgrounds and subjects blended together. Shock Labyrinth, on the other hand, achieves what Saw 3D could not. Shots are still given an overall color, but it does not overpower. The warm yellows, pinks, and especially reds pop out against the cool greens and blues of the background. The range of hues makes the shots more eye-catching and digestible. But what about the film's namesake, Shock Labyrinth 3D? Well, I was wrong in my Saw 3D review. I have a 3D Blu-ray player, my PS4. But, still don't have a 3D TV. So I can't speak for the 3D as much as I can its flattened alter ego. Of course the film throws stuff in your face. I mean, in a movie like this, it'd be criminal not to. But the 3D in this movie isn't so obtrusive to a 2D viewing. Take this scene. Even without the gimmick, a first-person shot for this scene isn't unusual. I also have to mention this shot of the fallen Yuki. You have Miyu in the foreground, the spiral staircase in the midground, and Yuki in the background. 3 different layerings. It's a visually intriguing and unique use of spacing. I can see its 3D appeal. Yet these shots are dynamic enough that their appeal isn't lost alongside depth. While the 3D seemed fun, watching in 2D wasn't a hindrance. But it is a horror film, so what about its horror? Well, I'll quickly note one scene I couldn't keep a straight face through. It's when Yuki's spirit repeatedly falls onto Motoki's face. Or maybe it'd be more accurate to say Motoki repeatedly makes himself a target. He never thinks to get out of the way, it's like a Looney Tunes cartoon. But that's only one scene I highlighted for the sake of a joke. Overall, I enjoyed the horror. The presentation is where the fear really shines. Its musical arrangement effectively imparts an uncomfortable atmosphere. Sometimes it sounds like something out of Silent Hill. I especially love the visuals. The film has an abundance of creepy, unique imagery, none of which are redundant. It held my attention in a firm grasp. The score and visuals all culminate in my favorite scene. The backwards sampled unnatural music. Yuki's crazy entrance. All make this a chilling scene. Shock Labyrinth 3D, or I guess Shock Labyrinth in my case, is a film I enjoyed. Even if the story isn't phenomenal, the scenario's confinement and time travel appealed to me. On top of that, the visual design and score captured me. Shock Labyrinth is a film that lives and dies on its creative visuals, and it thrives.
私ここ見たことある。同じ夢を見るの。子供の頃からずっと。現実だったのかもわからない。じっとりとした場所。誰かが助けてって私に手を差し伸べるの。何度もみんなの名前を呼び続けたの。ケン君やもっちゃんがいつか助けに来てくれる。そう思って何度も。
2 years later, Takashi Shimizu would return to the third dimension with Tormented 3D. Once again, the film features rabbits, horror, and 3D. So much so that in Japan, the film is called
Rabbit Horror 3D.
A bit on the nose, but that's why it makes me smile. Although I really wish I could be calling it Rabbit Horror 3D, let's hop right into Tormented 3D. We follow Kiriko, a girl turned mute when her half-brother Daigo mercy kills a rabbit. Kiriko and Daigo find themselves haunted by a mysterious rabbit whose identity may be more familiar than they think. Kiriko must save her brother and rid her family of this haunting. Sadly, unlike Shock Labyrinth, Tormented is not English dubbed. Not an issue for me as I opt to read subtitles, but it's unfortunate for those who have an easier time listening in their native language. Once again, I couldn't view the film in 3D, but I didn't feel like I was missing much. The coolest moment is when the characters watch Shock Labyrinth 3D. It's a 3D movie in a 3D movie. I don't know if that's ever been done before, but I gotta give it props for that. For the most part though, the 3D is barely utilized. Almost nothing flies at the audience, but in very few moments. In a way, it's beneficial because it means many shots are not rendered tacky when viewed in 2D. However, the underutilized depth makes the gimmick seem like an afterthought. I have not seen the film in 3D, so maybe there's some appeal I missed. But the most I can say is that the 2D viewing didn't entice me so much to put on a pair of glasses and try it out. Visually, I found the film less impressive than Shock Labyrinth. When we first see the spirit of Kyoko, Daigo's mother, she looks like a Sadako knockoff. Later, Daigo's wrapped up in Kyoko's hair. It reminded me much of Ju-on. I found the visual scares regarding Kyoko, been there, done that. Although I did enjoy the rabbit. It first appears bearing simplistic features as a mascot suit, but suddenly they appear with digitigrade, blinking eyes, twitching nose, and nipples! It's a creepy play using Uncanny Valley, which brings me to Tormented scares. The scares often rely on sudden movement accompanied by loud sound. The film's horror is fast-paced, it's more along the lines of a thriller, and not a bad one as its scenes are able to provide an adrenaline kick. The story is hit and miss. At first I appreciated the allusion to Shock Labyrinth. Seeing the movie I just watched as, well, just a movie, added a surreality to the film. However, Shock Labyrinth's inclusion is somehow more than a reference while being nothing but. Shock Labyrinth feels very important. The bunny plush that incites the haunting is from Shock Labyrinth 3D. Kiriko and Daigo try to rid of it by returning it to Shock Labyrinth 3D. The building, although referred to as a hospital in this film, returns. It's located at an amusement park, just like the Shock Labyrinth. The buildings from both are architecturally similar. Nearly all the rooms are a structural copy of that in Shock Labyrinth. It practically is the Shock Labyrinth. However, Shock Labyrinth's only plot necessity is as a 3D movie with a bunny. At most, its use is a neat reference. The hospital sharing location and appearance with Shock Labyrinth is superfluous. None of the characters draw the parallel between the hospital and Shock Labyrinth. The basis of the hospital's importance is as Kyoko's death place. If all this location need be is a hospital, why bear such strong ties with Shock Labyrinth? The pseudo-return of Shock Labyrinth seemed to me like the result of reusing a set to save money. But because of it, there is a misleadingly strong connection with Shock Labyrinth that is non-existent in the plot. My remaining thoughts regard the twist and ending, so until around this time, it's spoiler territory. The twist reveals Daigo never existed. The killed rabbit was all an allegorical machination of Kiriko's mind. After the death of her birth mother, Kiriko had trouble accepting her father dating another woman like Kyoko. An overreaction at an amusement park resulted in Kiriko killing Kyoko along with her unborn son, Daigo. This was an effective twist. I enjoyed the flipped perspective it gave to Kiriko's father, Kohei. Initially, Kiriko's father seems neglectful and unlikable. He always forgets Daigo's birthday.
大吾の誕生日なんて忘れているに違いない。
And he loses it at Kiriko's concern towards Daigo, threatening to hospitalize her.
モンストロが過ぎるんだよ。これ以上言い張るんだったらさ、病院に連れてくしかないだろ。
But upon realizing Daigo's just a delusion, Kohei's actions are sensible. The twist transforms this character from neglectful jerk to concerned father. There are a few issues I have with the twist though. Quite a few scenes follow Daigo alone while Kiriko is asleep. But how can these scenes centered around Daigo exist, isolated from the girl imagining them? I suppose you can argue these are her dreams? It's an iffy excuse, but I can accept it. My other issue regards Kyoko's spirit. So this is just an extension of Kiriko's delirium, right? Wrong. We see Kyoko's spirit in a scene following Kohei. The narrative in this scene is completely detached from Kiriko and thus her delusion. This supports the idea that Kyoko's haunting is real. But come the twist 2/3 in, Kyoko's ghost vanishes from the plot. This leads to my next issue. By the big reveal, the plot is over. We find the truth about Kiriko, the conflict subsides, the movie is concluded. But there's still 20 minutes left. Because of this, we enter the final act at a moseying, directionless pace that slows the film to an awkward halt. For the sake of direction, the film has to invent a new conflict. This conflict centers around Daigo. Kohei begins hallucinating Daigo. Daigo leads Kohei to the abandoned hospital where Kiriko must rescue her father. Daigo's goal is to be born. New antagonist, new motive, new conflict, it's practically a new movie. This hard shift in gears leaves the movie unfocused. It's a shame because I love the latter third's conflict. Daigo is a great villain. He's unexpected, he has a personal relationship with the protagonist, and holds unique motives. I also love the ending, even if it confused me at first. Kiriko faces Daigo, confronted with a decision. Will she kill her unborn brother? She decides to stab Daigo, but in reality stabs herself. In my first viewing, I was taken aback. What, did Daigo pull a reverse card? But I was able to grasp it better on my second watch. Daigo says, in this scenario, this holds true. The plush rabbit represents Daigo. In her false memory of Kyoko's death, Kiriko walks away carrying an infant Daigo. Come the truth, we see Kiriko was in reality holding the stuffed rabbit. Thus his assertion as Kiriko's person when holding the toy rabbit. Hence why stabbing Daigo is, in actuality, stabbing herself. I enjoyed the strong use of symbols as the basis for this ending. I admire a film that requests an understanding of its story beyond a surface level comprehension from its audience. Tormented ends on a high note for me, although the journey there is a bit rickety. The visuals are average, the transition into the third act is akin to a hiccup, but the twist and direction the plot takes at the end kept me engaged throughout the climax. Tormented is speckled with curses and blessings that balanced itself out for me. Although I preferred Shock Labyrinth, I don't feel right in claiming it as a victor. Each film has their own merits. Shock Labyrinth takes a supernatural approach to horror as a means to make a chilling atmosphere with creative visuals. Meanwhile, Tormented is more concerned with the psyche of the protagonist, making a compelling character and thrilling plot. These may not be the best films J-horror has seen, but I don't regret my time with either of them. In fact, I enjoyed both of them for what they were. I've been Zibboyeye, or just Zib is fine, and thank you for watching. Zibbo, bye bye!